Hey everyone, I'm Ryan, a UVA Darden MBA and content intern at Management Consultant. In today's episode of Strategy Simplified, we have Managing Director at Consultya, Ahmed. He's here talking with us about his operations transformation program and shedding some interesting insights on how he's been successful throughout his career and how he's teaching professionals just like yourselves how to maximize their operations transformation toolkit. So tune in and listen as Ahmed sheds some interesting insights on how he's gotten to where he is today. Ahmed is the managing director of Consultya, a management consulting and capability building firm that helps industrial organizations sustainably transform and improve their bottom line. Before starting Consultya, Ahmed was a partner with DuPont Sustainable Solutions and an associate principal with Partners in Performance. In his early career, he was a plant manager at a leading construction materials company in Australia. Outside of his work with Consultya, Ahmed volunteers with the Mentoring for Growth program, helping small businesses solve their most pressing challenges. And once again, Ahmed, I want to welcome you to your third appearance on Strategy Simplified. We're excited to have you today and looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Thanks a lot, Ryan, and thanks for having us here again. It's always good being here.
Yeah, of course. So I'll just go ahead and jump right in here. You know, we've talked in the last couple of installments about your career and your past and kind of what brought you here today. I'm curious, you've had a very successful career in operations transformation. What are 2 to 3 key skills that you think operations leaders should develop to advance their careers?
Yeah, look, really good question, Ryan. So what I've found that's worked really well, especially when it comes to ops, first and foremost, is to really understand the business. And when I say that, there is the part that we would inherently default towards, which is let's just sit behind computers, let's pull out spreadsheets. We all like to analyze numbers and do all the analytical stuff. That's all fantastic. In ops, there's a lot that is really hidden that's not seen on the spreadsheets. So when I say understanding the business, I mean, you got to really spend a significant amount of time in the front line, in the field, on the ground, learning bottom up how it actually works. Now, sometimes organizations, you could be maybe lucky. I'll tell you what, when I graduated, fortunately or unfortunately, my first job was chiseling asphalt off pavers and shuttle buggies when I started in construction. And the first thing that my boss said at the time, who was the maintenance manager, was, "Mate, I don't think you're expecting an office and a fancy desk on your first day, are you?" And I said, "I've got no idea what the expectations are." And he just pointed out to the door. And for 6 months, I didn't even have a desk. For 6 months, I was stuck outside. I was working alongside the fitters, the mechanics, in the stores, in the warehouse. I was everyone's lackey, everyone's personal assistant as such. And while at the time I'm thinking in my head, I've poured my heart and soul in engineering and all the rest of it. Why am I doing all this? I look back now and I think, gosh, like it really gave me an edge, because once I got into the office, I knew exactly how things worked outside, and that gave me so much leverage. The second thing that then really complements that in terms of growing your career is becoming useful. And it sounds cliche, but really very few people are inherently independently useful. Okay, so most people want to sit there and be told what to do and have everything built out for them, everything planned for them, and everything's predictable. If you think about spending that time outside learning the business from the bottom up, you're inherently useful because you've seen the problems and you understand the struggles that people are going through. You understand the concerns the front line is facing, and you can also imagine and comprehend and see in your head what is really going on. So you're thinking, okay, now I can really leverage my problem-solving skills to start to really solve what I'm seeing outside. So you're inherently by default useful. No one's had to come to you to say, pick an improvement project, what do you think we should do, etc. You've felt it by being out as is. And so it makes you incredibly useful immediately. Plus, you've built the relationships. So you could already start to get out and work with the team and get things going without everyone going, he's the he's the fancy guy, coming down and telling us what to do, and they've got no idea what we go through. They have no idea what we do. They've just gotten a piece of paper from uni, and now they think they figured it out. So you get to move away from all that instantaneously. Okay, so it's really super helpful. And I think the third, which then probably applies to ops, but also elsewhere, is have a development plan. If you're lucky that your company has a formal development plan process in place, great. But it's really a hidden contract. It's a hidden contract with your boss to say, if I work on those 5, 6, 10 areas, am I going to be moving forward? And so there's no surprises at the end. So a year in, 2 years in, we've been working through this, and we follow up on a quarterly or half yearly or annually, whatever it is, ideally more frequently than just annually, but have your development plan in place so that when it comes to that, first year tenure or second year tenure, you're in a position to say, well, I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready to move forward. And one of the best advices that I then got at the time was my boss saying, so who's going to replace you? All that work that you're doing. And I thought, oh, wow, let me go back and train someone up really quick. And so then I realized really quickly, and all my promotions subsequently were a lot quicker because I had developed the next person to take my spot. So instead of thinking in your head, let me keep it all in my head so I can keep my job, which is incredibly ancient way of thinking, the right way to think is let me disseminate everything I know and build my team's capability, because as soon as they can do what I'm doing, I can also step up and start doing the next thing as well.
Yeah, that's incredible insight. And what I'm hearing a little bit of is kind of working yourself out of the job in a way so that you can kind of work into the next spot.
Exactly, which is not incredibly intuitive from the get-go. Nobody wants to consciously work themselves out of a job, but you almost have to think like that to be able to get the next promotion quicker.
Yeah, so I mean, what that inherently tells me is that you have to have kind of a tremendous amount of self-confidence in yourself, in yourself and your abilities. Is that fair?
Correct, 100%. And that comes by knowing what you're doing, and that comes by spending a lot of time outside and inside learning from people, just getting out of your cubicle. People just get stuck in their cubicles and they get stuck in the day jobs, and they're not going out and talking to other teams and spending time in the field, etc. So the more you're aware of even the cross-functional intersections and the interfaces where most of the challenges typically are, the more useful you become and the more informed you become.
Yeah, that's fascinating insight. In your team at Consultya has developed an operations transformation program that is I think geared towards folks that want to understand this process and learn how to do this. Right? Can you kind of give us a little insight into that program and really talk about the value proposition that your team brings to the table here?
Yeah, sure. So all throughout my transformations and career in consulting, I've loved the aspect of building capability. It was always one of those really highlight moments of any of the engagements I've been on. So typically part of, sustaining those transformations is that you'll develop training and you'll develop coaching programs, etc., to ensure that all the new tools that you've introduced, all the behaviors that you've changed, all of that is going to sustain moving forward. So capability building is normally a large part of any successful transformation. So I've always enjoyed it. And then I got out and I started working for myself. And then, what I ended up finding is that there's not really a lot of very good material in the market that can just get you to really understand how does an operation transformation work end to end, from when I need to diagnose an organization up until sustaining and handing over to the client. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a lot of material outside in the market. I think a lot of it is just not organized in a way that tells you that happens first, then that needs to happen next, then that needs to come in third, and those three elements make up that subcomponent of a big larger system of work that needs to be done to put it all together. So I got really passionate about it. I had learned obviously a lot of really good tools through my time in Partners in Performance and later with DuPont, plus my own experience having done these transformations. You also learn a lot from the clients as well that you've worked with. So what I've done is I've then then, come back and have put together, a 9-module operations transformation program, that's really end to end. And a lot of it just starts with I mean, if you think of an ops transformation, the key theme here is productivity. Okay, so a lot of it just starts with, why is productivity so important? You know what? And productivity can be extrapolated to a nation. A productive nation is a very successful nation, and one who's not productive is not. And it's the same with any organization as well. So you start with why productivity is so important and why you need to do a lot more with what you have, and then you start working through some fundamental theoretical concepts, like, why is mindset so important? How do you build high performance habits? And where that then starts to lead you is into, well, how do I know that I'm doing the right work? And then how do I do that work well? And then we start to get into, how do we diagnose the organization? And then how do we set up that transformation office, and how do we deliver it? So it's really that skill set, I suppose, but it's both theoretical and pragmatic in a way that it doesn't tangle you up so much theoretically that you still wouldn't know what to do, because that's what I've faced in the transformation space. Typically, you come in after a tier 1 consultancy or a big 4, or someone has been there for months, and they end up with the 600-page deck or the 1,000-page deck, and the client sitting there with that thing printed off on their desk going, Ahmed, where do we start? Like, what do we need to do tomorrow? What needs to happen? And so theory is good, but if it's not pragmatized in a way and simplified that you can realize those incremental improvements, you really miss out completely. So that program is really about just making sure that you understand the ops transformation toolkit end to end, so that you can adapt it to any transformation that you want to embark on, whether as a consultant or even as an in-house line manager as well. You could use those same tools to have a great and a significant step change relatively quickly in your organization.
Yeah, well, whenever I hear about 1,000-page deck, that makes my skin crawl, just kind of in general, to be honest. But I can totally follow what you're saying. How do you take that and actually take action based off of 1,000-page deck versus just talking about these wild ideas that sound cool in theory?
Exactly. And remembering that they have a day job as well. They're incredibly stretched and busy as is, right? So the value proposition is that I am gonna help you while you work in it. I'll help you work on it, and together we can make something work that's gonna be really, robust and pragmatic for the organization.
Yeah, and this, I think, is a nice little segue into another question I had. You mentioned about kind of a mindset shift that goes on in this process. So when I hear you talking about kind of a team of consultants that's going to sit down and kind of get their hands dirty, is really what I'm hearing. Why does a mindset shift become so important for that? And maybe talk to me a little bit about how your team works to kind of build that mindset into some of the people that go through this program.
Yeah. So what happens is most of the time in operations, your clients will tend to see most problems through a technical lens, and they will typically want to solve it through a technical lens. So you go in and every improvement project or every initiative, every root cause analysis that's been done anywhere has been a technical problem and a technical fix. If we replace the gadget, if we replace the widget, if we just spend more upgrading this, if we just did they're all technical fixes. The reality is, with a transformation to be holistic, sure, technicality is super important, but we've also got the organizational effectiveness element to it. Which includes capability. There's the leadership and culture element to it. There's the management operating system and the KPIs and all that needs to also feature. That stuff typically inherently doesn't feature. Now, when it comes to the transformation itself, what typically happens is people are tangled up technically, but more importantly, they typically have had a little bit of a churn of consultants. So they've seen them come through, deliver the deck, go away, and there's a relative level of fatigue that the teams would have had. What you're trying to do with the mindset is that mindset and behaviors is you want to just generate that little bit of a step change in the way that we think, to start embracing the change that is yet to happen, but you're doing it in a way that is then pragmatic. So when we say mindset, it might sound incredibly fluffy. Typically what's worked really well is is the on the back of the influence model, where it says, okay, so you really got to start by role modeling. So we're going to spend a lot of time with the leaders now, making sure that there are leadership routines that are in place that will actually have an impact in the operation. So what do we mean by leadership routines? So, it's easy to say, hey, let's have a continuous improvement culture. Let's improve our culture. What does that mean? Well, it means behaviors. Well, what's in behaviors? Well, it's routines. What do we mean by routines? Well, as a leader, I will expect you to be out there walking the field once, twice, 3 times a week, for example. And while you're doing it, you're going to praise people that are doing good work, and here's a way to do it. But you're also going to be giving people feedback whom are not performing to the level that they should be. You're going to learn how to have difficult conversations as well, which are not to bring anyone down, but to also build capability. Okay, you're going to learn to maybe attend one lower level meeting once a week or once a month. You will host a problem solving session once a week with your team on some of their big critical issues. So you're practically booking time in their calendar for proactive work that will make a difference, noticeable difference, visible difference. It's called visible felt leadership in the organization, because it's both visible, I can see, and I can feel the passion. So role modeling is so important. Then the second part of it is comms. You'll always hear people saying that I do not know what's happening. The consultants are here. The Axemen's here. They're cutting toes again. And when there's change happening in an organization, or definitely if there's consultants around, no news is really bad news. So you really want to be able to articulate a really good vision and a really good set of communications that, are devised in a comms plan that you can deploy. So you're visibly changing the way that you're working as a leader, and you're starting to role model this, and the guys will start look up and say, hang on, something's really changing here. Those guys are really starting to behave differently. You're communicating so everyone knows what's happening and where they're going. And then you need to start setting up, those reinforcing mechanisms. You want to be able to come back and say, okay, here are the KPIs that we're going to install, the reviews that we're going to have, the way that we're going to govern how some of those elements are going, so that we know how we're tracking, and we're going to keep everyone involved into how that's going through dashboards, through state of nation meetings, that kind of stuff. And then building capability is actually a part of the mindset and behavior change as well. So think of those 4 elements that you'll need to really have a good start to any major transformation program. So I need to role model, I need to set up the comms, I got to set up the systems and processes to reinforce all of this. And then I got to start, getting the talents up, because we're going to be changing the way that we're working, and people need to understand what good leadership now needs to start looking like. None of that is technical. It's all the soft skills that are required to enable a successful transformation.
We'll be right back after this quick break.
Have you ever heard a new digital trend and thought to yourself, okay, does this really matter? Asking the right questions helps you cut through the noise and get down to what matters most. I'm Jim Hertzfeld, host of the What If, So What podcast, where we discover what's possible with digital and figure out how to make it real by asking what if, so what, and most importantly, now what? Subscribe and listen, and together we can turn big ideas into tangible actions so you can get shit done.
Yeah, and it sounds incredibly robust too, if you ask me. One of the areas that I kind of want to dig a little bit deeper in and maybe double click on here is, you mentioned structured communications. At Management Consultant, we're always talking about being structured in your communications and the way that you deliver messages both to clients, to internal and external stakeholders. So I would love to hear a little bit about how you think about structuring communications, and maybe also some of the biggest challenges that some of the students that you work with in this program encounter when they're trying to learn how to do this effectively.
Sure. To overly simplify it and not preach a lot about comms, there's top down and bottom up. And most people struggle knowing which one to use and when to use it. So you may have heard of the pyramid principle, which is really starting with your overarching summary, and then breaking that down one level into the sub elements, and then breaking each one down into the further sub elements. So you keep drilling down into the so what's of each of the insight. Okay, now top down works if you're dealing with executives, if you're dealing with senior people who want the answer first, and maybe I will need you to come back and tell me one or two supplementary bits of information that I need to know. So a typical deck, for example, would look like 10 slides up front. Here's the executive summary. Here's the roadmap. Here's the resourcing. Here's what you can expect to get, etc. And then there's a 300-page appendix that follows that kind of backs all that up. Then you've got the other way, which is the bottom up, where let me take you through that journey of how I got to how I generated the insights, what they meant, what we did about them, and subsequently the answer that we got to. Now, so it's really easy to simply cut it and say the guys at the top want top down and the guys at the bottom are bottom up. And let me learn how to do both. Now, generally, a lot of people learn top down because that's the strategy toolkit, but very few learn how to do bottom up. And in ops, you got to do a lot of bottom up because there's a lot of very geeky technical people across all the levels in the organization. And I promise you that in the ops world, if you're not aligned with the different levels of the organization, you will not succeed. Okay, so let me work that towards the end. I've just come out from an incredible 8-week asset management diagnostic across 3 industrial cities in Qatar. And the amount of buy-in that I needed to get from everyone, engineering level all the way to the executive vice president, is phenomenal. But when the EVP sat there with that closeout and could see the incredible buy-in from his team to the extent that I got some of the client members to present at the end. So I was doing a lot less talking. They were doing a lot more talking. They were looking going, well, this is sold. There's nothing left to do. The consultant's quiet and my team is taking over. How incredible is that, So sometimes success, well, in my case, success is they talk, I talk a lot less. Now, in that case, while you might think that an executive vice president of a very large corporation, would need a top-down comms, in his case, he did not. He was actually an incredibly curious individual. He's grown through the ranks, and we needed a series of meetings to get to that closeout where it's been a bottom-up experience the entire time. So we had to take him through a little bit of a deep dive into the organization and what we found, a little bit of a deep dive into the strategy and the frontline execution, what we found, etc. So he wanted to understand the insights to be able to endorse a roadmap. Sometimes someone else who maybe is not as interested in the technicalities, or depending on their background, they might come from a marketing background or a sales background where all the technicalities and the processes don't seem to interest them, would just be interested in the answer first. And if someone else has a question about it, then they can go for it. So communications so the first part that a lot of people really struggle with is which type do I need to use for the client that I'm with. That's normally where it fails, and it fails quite miserably. And then the second one, which is really hard in the world of ops, you could be within a day running a workshop with a bunch of really geeky engineers that are so tangled up technically and just wanting to get it done at their level. And you might be in the afternoon talking to the executive vice president as well. And so you're constantly shifting your type of comms throughout the levels within the day. You could be coaching a frontline meeting, or you could be running a workshop with executives within the same day. And I find operations incredibly unique in that sense. It's not the kind of gig where you're either stuck at the top or the bottom. You're working across the levels, and you're working across those levels sometimes within the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that kind of points a little bit to what you said earlier, right? About kind of, I use the term getting your hands dirty, but doing the job, being on the front lines and seeing what everybody's doing, right?
Exactly. And it gives you credibility. So when I'm getting questioned by the executive vice president, I've been out, I can articulate it in 2 seconds. I can tell him what I saw, I can tell him what it feels like. It's really easy for me. So again, comms can be really facilitated when you understand things well. Because the guys will tell me, some of the junior guys on the team were saying, Ahmed, how come you're not stressing out about this thing? Or how come you haven't spent time preparing? And I said, I don't know, but I understand it. If I sit there and I need to recall every word on the slide, that will stress me out, because if I miss a word, my entire chain of thought could completely fall over. But I understand what we're doing. I can completely articulate it. I know what the guys are doing in the front line. I can explain that to to the audience in whatever way they want to. If I need to get on a whiteboard and draw, I will. If I need to talk to a slide, I will. If you want to turn it all off and just have me talk, I will. And so sometimes comms can also be could be super facilitated with good understanding of the real problems, Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And by getting there and kind of being on the front lines and doing that, I'm sure you uncover problems that weren't even apparent that they were actually problems to begin with.
Correct. And that's the stuff that doesn't show up on the reports. You just keep getting all the green KPIs on the reports, but it's almost like something intuitive in the senior leaders. They feel something's wrong, but they're not getting it through the comms and they're not seeing it in the reporting. And so they will be going to the likes of me in this case, because they don't want someone sitting in the boardroom doing analysis. They want the person who's going to be able to get out of there, roll up his sleeves, and really understand what the hell's going on in the business. Yeah.
Yeah. That's fascinating to me. And what I'm trying to also dig into a little bit is, whenever you work with program participants, are there kind of light bulb moments that happen during the program? Like, for example, for me just now, when I was listening to you talk, I was thinking to myself about, I bet you see things that other people don't see and uncover problems. That was kind of a light bulb moment as you were talking. Does that same type of situation occur during your program? And if so, maybe would you mind sharing kind of the top one or two that are pretty common?
We'll be right back after this quick message.
In today's corporate world, it's not enough to just do good work. How you convey your work determines how it and you are perceived by your stakeholders. Have you ever said something like, I have to give a presentation, but don't know where to start? I know what I want to say, but I don't know how to say it? The meeting went off the rails. They kept asking me questions and missed the point. I feel stuck in my career. My work isn't getting noticed. If you ever asked yourself any of those questions, our Power Presentations program is for you. In Power Presentations, you work with an expert coach in 10 one-hour sessions on your actual work deliverables. Together, we clarify your key takeaways, work on putting a story together around those key takeaways, ensure that your data visualizations are clear and easy to understand, and make sure that your work is driving your stakeholders towards a decision point. Our goal, to help you put your best foot forward to drive the stakeholder decisions you want, and ensure that an unclear presentation doesn't neuter your influence. This is the first time that we're bringing the training we've done with Fortune 500 teams like Meta, CVS Health, American Express, Hershey, and eBay to individual clients. You can learn more about Power Presentations through the link in the show notes.
We'll be right back after this quick break.
Hey you! Yeah, you listening. Do you like personal finance or real estate? Are you itching to build wealth and create a better life for yourself or your family? Then you need to come check out the Life, Money, and More podcast with real estate agent, YouTuber, and actor Sage Weiss. This isn't your average finance show. We dive deep and do not sugarcoat topics around money and life. The Life, Money, and More podcast releases 2 episodes a week just for you, because we're all about helping you win in this crazy world we live in. Come join the thousands of listeners on the Life, Money, and More podcast.
So those light bulb moments that you see some of the students go through, one is, wow, I didn't realize, how much hands-on we needed to be if we were to choose a career line along, that ops transformation space. Okay, so this is a complete different mindset in the way that we think about our careers, etc. Now, some might then think, wow, this is way, way more exciting than what I had initially anticipated, while others, they start to retract. They're thinking, I want to be in the office. I want to do the analysis. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's just a very different gig altogether. So I think maybe what it does is it helps you with a career choice nearly instantaneously. Do you want to get into the ops transformation space? That's really the hands-on turning the dial at the bottom line, or do you want to maybe talk about ops strategy and the next 5 to 10 years and all the rest of it? They're just 2 very different things. right? So that's one of those light bulb moments. Now, the second one that really comes through is you need a lot of leadership skills to be able to coach the line. How do you coach the line? How do you coach a maintenance manager when you haven't been a maintenance manager yourself? Or how can you coach a production manager? How can you coach a supervisor? How do you coach a frontline technician in a meeting? Great question. So what's really cool about all this is if you take the example of that you've started your career in consulting as a young analyst. As an analyst, I was in mining trucks doing rounds, doing my dial, the day of life of studies. So I'd sit there next to the operator and I'm spending 12 hours in a truck. So I got to know the operator very well. And then I'm doing supervisor effectiveness, day in life of studies. So I've spent God knows how many months worth, if not more, of time with supervisors, looking at how they behave, how they act, what they do, and now so I've got the theory. I get to see what they do, but I'm also learning from the good stuff that they're doing, and I'm learning from the stuff that I can see is also not working for them. So you're also building up your own IP, and you've got the theory and the toolkit, and here's what's good, etc., to back you up. So what's really cool about this career line is, and you can argue a lot of my friends in private equity or investment banking, they're sitting there making the big decisions in the board while I'm out there with the supervisors in the front line. It doesn't sound glamorous, but where I feel privileged now is I understand I can get parachuted into any one of those organizations and I can run them with my eyes closed. I'm not a line person, but I've learned the business from consulting by working my way through the line, because you're paired up at your level. I'm an analyst, I'm on the front line, I'm an associate, maybe I'm on a supervisor level, I'm a manager, I pair up with a manager, I'm an associate principal, I pair up with the general manager, I'm a partner, I pair up with the executive. So you've learned to pair up through every level in the organization. You've worked at that level, you've solved problems at that level, you've coached at that level, you're in a really good position. And that's something that excites a lot of the students as well, but also scares others who think, well, maybe that's just not what I want to do. So I think it's a big divide that you start seeing at that point in time. But for those that then embrace it, I think they get even more excited about the prospect of, yes, I want to actually be a lot more hands-on. I don't just want to be sitting in the room doing analysis and presenting material, etc. So they start realizing that they're incredibly two different career lines, really. I mean, they're both consulting, etc. They both compensate handsomely. They both take it to partnership level, but they're inherently very different career lines. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that too, because in my former career before coming to Darden, I was in investment banking. And one of the reasons that I wanted to leave was because I didn't feel like I knew how to make decisions about a business. Thought that I knew cool things in a spreadsheet, but that was it. So I personally definitely can kind of align with what you're saying and see the value to that understanding. And to that point a little bit too, some of the program participants that go through this program with you and your team, can you talk a little bit about some of what are some of the opportunities that come to these graduates, whether it be career advancement or just different opportunities altogether? I'd love to hear a little bit about what kind of you see people doing after this.
Yeah, okay. So what happens is, so let me tell you about maybe the caliber of students that we've had so far. We've had people in junior roles in operations who wanted to either move up or transition into an improvement function. So, all those operations organizations, they've got business improvement functions or strategy functions or transformation functions. Sometimes it's all the way up to a CTO now, a chief transformation officer, all the way down to a continuous improvement manager or a strategy manager or a transformation manager who's also then got his team of analysts and associates, depending on the size of the organization. So you've got a full line now that takes you up to the C-suite through the improvement line. Some organizations are really clever because that's how we used to work with them, a while back as well, is to say, get your superstars through the improvement function for a year, because it gets them out of their department. They get to work on a portfolio of initiatives. They get to learn problem-solving skills, get exposure to different parts of the organization. And then after a year, you can bring them back into the line, but they will have learned, a much more enhanced toolkit, etc. And what we're doing with a lot of those more junior focus is that exactly. So, I was a graduate engineer. I became a project engineer. I was a graduate commercial analyst, and I became an associate of sorts. And I want to wiggle my way around the organization. If I can learn that toolkit, I may be in a position to get myself into a business improvement function. And that's generally where a lot of the help has been. It's been helping people from the line move into an improvement function, or sometimes those in an improvement function have learned that toolkit to apply and to maybe complement their existing toolkit while they're in a business improvement function as well. And that's generally where it's been the handiest for our students.
Yeah, that's excellent. I love to hear that. And and just so folks that are listening or watching this know, we'll link to the program in the show notes as well, so different folks can get in touch. But as a final question before we kind of move on to some more personal questions, Ahmed, I'd love to hear, do you just have one kind of final piece of encouragement to help our listeners just as they think about the best ways to maximize their career potential and their overall impact? Any words of encouragement you might provide?
Yeah, the words of encouragement, maybe at a personal level, like forget transformation, but when I came out of uni, I read a few books. I moved in with my auntie, and she had a library set up and a bed. So I moved practically into her library, and I started picking books before going to bed. And one of the ones I read was Rich Dad Poor Dad, amongst a bunch of other books. And I very quickly realized how little I knew about anything that wasn't engineering. Throughout my degree, I was stuck studying fluids and a pipe and projectiles and God knows what else. And a lot of that bigger picture stuff was missing. And so nearly all of my savings in my first year and my second year as a graduate, I was spending on learning opportunities. I was doing property courses, stock market courses. I was doing finance. I was doing a lot of personal development outside of that space. I think my biggest tip is you can never not learn enough. And it's almost like every time you learn a thing, it opens up 10 further possibilities or 10 more questions that you now need answering. So it's still like a vicious circle. It's like you don't really get anywhere. And the more you learn, the more questions that you have. And what I think people should do, because I look back, ops transformation or not, in my case, as someone that started as an analyst, I would have loved to have also had the opportunity to have maybe seen a bit more in terms of how does it all fit together. You go into the organization, you go into even any top strategy shop, and they'll feed you the training that you need for your level. Here's your problem solving training. Here's the Excel modeling training. Here's all that stuff that you need to make you really useful at your level. Sometimes just having an understanding of how it all fits together at the very highest level can also be very beneficial for you, because it could also guide your career, like some of those people are learning. It could guide where within your career you'd want to be more influenced by, etc. So I've always thought, something like that ops transformation program would have been very good for me starting off as well, just to give me a much clearer picture as to what I'm in for. While I'm learning all the hands-on tools. But then for someone else that's, say, not getting into consulting, use that toolkit and apply it where you are. There's a lot of merit in being able to bring learnings from other industries or other businesses across, especially when you can pragmatize it so that it works in its relevant context. So that may need some expertise, but the more you practice it, the better you get at doing it. And that's sometimes what consulting is about. You've seen all these different chefs in all these different, putting all these recipes together, and you're able to come back and say, well, if I take a little bit from that chef here and one from here, one from there, I'll have this perfect recipe that can suit that individual client. And learning as a younger folk can give you a lot of that breadth that you need initially to be able to even just to inspire creativity. Creativity can really be inspired on the back of some knowledge that you've had, and so it can really help boost your career and or help you make the right choices about your career as well.
Yeah, I love that advice, and I think that the way that you put it was extremely eloquent. My grandfather used to tell me just be interesting, just know about a lot of stuff, because it'll help you talk to different people and understand different things. So I really love that advice a lot. As you know, here at Management Consultant, we like to end things off with at least one personal question. So, my personal question to you is for folks that are in the early stages of their career, just getting started, maybe they just graduated university or they're just embarking upon an MBA program. What would be some words of wisdom that you would give to them, things that you wish that you had known back then? I know you mentioned going through the ops transformation program early, but any other just kind of tidbits of information that you would provide to some of the younger or early stage career listeners?
Yeah, look, it's funny because I'm nearly 16 years into my career, and I honestly sometimes feel like I'm just starting because I don't have all the answers, right? Am I where I should have been? I've got no idea. Like, I didn't plan for this, right? So number one is have a plan, but don't get hung up on your plan. I was in engineering school, and I didn't think for a second that I was going to be building roads in the construction industry when I graduated. And then I was building roads and I was learning about asphalt plants, but it gave me the opportunity to run a production facility at the age of 25. I was responsible for people, for lives, for a couple of shifts. I had a P&L, and I was pretty young at the time. And so that opportunity, I could never have envisioned it, but it worked out better than what I could have ever thought, right? And then consulting had a really strange trajectory for me in that sense as well. I had not envisioned it. I had not even heard of it when I first got started. And things have worked out better. I'll tell the folks, look, in my early days as an analyst, I was told all the awful things. You're not going to cut it. How'd you get in? Mate, you don't have what it takes. Mate, you're a waste of time. You're a waste of breath. You're a waste of air. I heard it all. And I knew that I just needed to put my head down and just get on with the work. And lo and behold, if I had accepted the partnership in the first consultancy that I had worked for, I had that offer as a 31-year-old, which would have made me the youngest in that firm's history. So much for the folk that, is wasting everyone's time and is a waste and all the rest of it. So don't get bogged down with people's feedback, because most people, unfortunately and sadly, suck. That's just the way it is. So you got to have so much trust and faith in yourself. People will do what they can to help or not, but you just got to be focused, and you got to stick to the process. Don't judge the output. That's how we do transformations. I break up the value driver tree into inputs and outputs, and I tell the guys, don't worry about profit, don't worry about revenue, don't worry about the top line. If we fix these little behaviors and if we fix these little things at the grassroots levels, the output will take care of itself. And it's almost like that at your personal level in your career. Stick with the process. So what's the process? Well, the process is I got to continue building relationships. The process is if I get knocked down by any tough feedback, I'll get up, I'll take it on, and I'll say thanks, and I'll move forward. The process is I will keep applying like mad, because statistically something is bound to land and stick. I will keep doing the right thing by myself, by my personal development, and by my learning. So devise a plan, but focus your plan on the inputs, because they're the stuff that you can control. You can't control the job that you're going to get and where you're going to get it and who your boss is going to be and the culture of that. You really can't. But you can definitely manage all these inputs that you can have a direct impact on. That's the stuff that you want to measure. That's the stuff you want to track, because you'd be amazed at the momentum that you build year after year, where that's going to take you. But it's invisible, and there's no gauge for it, and no one can really predict where it leads. But trust the process. Trust the process. It works in transformations, and it will work for you as a person as well.
I love that. That sounds very much like a personal responsibility message, taking control of the things that you can control. So I love that. Ahmed, I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for getting on the podcast with us. As I mentioned earlier, this is the third installment. I personally enjoyed hearing the first two installments, learning about your background, hearing about your awesome career trajectory. This was great, getting a chance to talk about the ops transformation process. And thank you again very much for your time today.
No worries, Ryan. Thanks a lot for your time, and have a good evening. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us on Strategy Simplified as we spoke with Ahmed, Managing Director at Consultya, about how he's helping professionals just like yourselves build capabilities in operations transformation. If you're interested to learn more, check the show notes, and we'll have a link to Ahmed's website so that you can learn more about him, Consultya, as well as the Operations Transformation Program. Thanks, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.